doesn't love a reboot? What's that? Everyone? Well, what a disheartening surprise that is. Truth is, reboots generally suck and are often done to make fast and easy cash, most likely due to a lack of creativity. Film studios and TV networks may have been destroying our childhood memories for years, but they are not alone when it comes to unleashing harebrained remakes on the world. Because if anyone is going to exploit something and milk it for all that it's worth, it's these guys. Now, WWE is a 365 days per year business with a lot of television time to fill up. So it's not necessarily unforgivable that they may rehash some stuff from time to time. However, it can often lead to seriously diminishing returns and can sometimes end up tainting the legacy of the original too. I mean, the fact that I don't have enough material to do a 10 WWE reboots that were totally awesome should give you some clue as to their success rate when it comes to doing it. I'm Adam Pacitti from Cultaholic Wrestling, and these are 10 WWE reboots that sucked. Join us. Number 10, the New Rockers. Imagine one of the best, most exciting teams in WWE history. A duo that captivated the hearts and minds of fans across the globe with their colourful appearance and cutting-edge high-flying in-ring style. Now replace Shawn Michaels with Al Snow. Not as good really, is it? No disrespect to the Snowman intended, because he was a talented performer in his own right, but Leif Cassidy wasn't exactly the Heartbreak Kid, who was establishing himself as one of the best ever during this same time period while riding high as WWE champ. The New Rockers only made a handful of televised appearances all told, and they went from being a straight-up babyface duo to purposely anachronistic comedy heels, supposedly at the suggestion of Michaels, the sexy saboteur. The team actually briefly feuded with HBK, meeting him in singles matches on Raw, but that's about as good as it got for the New Rockers. Besides that, they were mostly a lower card novelty act and were never given a serious push. Had WWE teamed two solid workers like Snow and Jannetty together and given them a new, different name and a better direction, they could have been a worthwhile addition to the tag ranks. Instead, everyone watching could only think, well, they're not as good as the Rockers, what am I watching here? Is Walker Texas Ranger on? Number 9, the New Blackjacks. Oh look, it's a new, even more anachronistic team with new placed in front of it. That's just great, isn't it? And this one is even more questionable because it's not like many people watching at the start of the Attitude Era would even really know or be too familiar with the original Blackjacks either. At least with the Rockers, it was a fairly recent act, but the Blackjacks' heyday was back in the 1970s for the Worldwide Wrestling Federation. The new Blackjacks certainly looked the part, two tall Texans in the form of Barry Windham and Bradshaw. For Windham especially, it was apropos, as he was the son of one of the original members of the team. Once again, stick Windham and Bradshaw together, give them another, more modern gimmick and a cool name, and turn them loose, and they could have done something great as a team. Rebooting the Blackjacks wasn't it though, and the concept was simply a way of sticking two people together who were floundering with other gimmicks. Windham as the bizarre stalker character, and the future JBL as Justin Hawk Bradshaw. They were formed and disbanded within a year after Windham turned on Bradshaw. The OG Blackjacks were inducted into the WWE Hall of Fame in 2006. The new Blackjacks, however, will be the first inductees into the Adam Pacitti crap tag teams of the 90s Hall of Shame. Number 8, the new Midnight Express. Can you believe our luck? It's another rebooted classic tag team from the late 90s, and they're new too! I love those. Once again, this was a temporary solution to give two contracted performers something to do while they earned their downside guarantees. Bombastic Bob Holly had been spinning his wheels as the spark plug, while bodacious Bart Gunn was trying to find his way after splitting from Smoking Gunn's partner Billy. And so they were teamed up as part of the NWA Mini Invasion of 1998, accompanied by longtime Midnight's manager Jim Cornette. The whole thing just felt antiquated and simply didn't connect with the audience. Bob and Bart were both decent and dependable workers, but they didn't have an ounce of the chemistry that Bobby Eaton had developed with Dennis Condrey or Stan Lane. I mean, I'm sure Holly and Gunn were happy to be given something to do after months of sweet FA, but they had to have known that being the new Midnight Express was not a winning role. Cornette also wasn't a fan and does not consider this version part of the Midnight's canon. Simply put, the performers weren't invested and the Attitude Era audience didn't care for it either, perhaps somewhat preoccupied by the big lovely boobies and the middle fingers. Number 7, Tough Enough. WWE's first proper foray into reality TV was by and large a successful one. Watching a bunch of wannabes train and try to make it as WWE superstars made for compelling television. The ratings were strong and exposed the WWE product to a wider MTV-powered audience, and the first few seasons produced performers who would go on to make an impact in the business. Maven, Nydia, John Morrison, Miss Jackie, Matt Morgan, Ryback, and The Miz all came from the competition and went on to have careers of varying significance. So when WWE decided to revive the concept after a 7-year layoff in 2011, hopes were high and only got higher when it was revealed that Stone Cold Steve Austin, Booker T, and Trish Stratus would all be involved. But all it really gave us was winner Andy Levine getting humiliated by Austin and Vince McMahon on an episode of Raw before practically disappearing from the business. Season 6 looked a little different in layout and presentation, but the results were all the same, with the winners being washouts, even if it did give us Sonya Deville, Mandy Rose, and Velveteen Dream. They may have had more star power attached, but the later seasons of Tough Enough failed to spark, and it wouldn't surprise me if WWE have permanently binned the idea. Number 6, the XFL. Alright, so branding the rebooted 2020 version of the XFL a failure implies that the original was a roaring success. And as we all know, it was far from that, costing Vince McMahon and WWE a small fortune, with the quality of the games and overall presentation of the product bringing widespread mockery and condemnation from the mainstream.
I know, Marge, I'm waiting for the new XFL season.
But I'm not an American football fan, so seeing footage of the games with Vince McMahon cutting pre-game promos, JR calling the action, and the emphasis on cheerleaders and other extracurriculars made the whole thing objectively better. The original XFL was an audacious, ill-advised, and expensive mistake, but at least it was bloody interesting. So what happened with the revamped versions exactly? Well, just another sterilized sports ball league, that's what. There were no Vince McMahon promos, Jesse Ventura wasn't there. They didn't even use WWE television to snap back at its critics, as they had done almost 2 decades prior. It was a yawner, and while there was initial excitement and ratings were encouraging, it soon tapered off before dying a limp death thanks to the coronavirus pandemic. Now it's up to new XFL owner The Rock to finally do it right whenever it does come back. And if every game doesn't start with something being turned sideways and shoved straight up someone's candy ass, I'm gonna be very, very disappointed. Number 5, LOD 2005. The Road Warriors were brilliant, weren't they? Just a couple of big, brutal beefcakes in cool face paint and shoulder pads dismantling fools in the most intense way possible. It's no surprise that they were one of the biggest teams of the 80s and 90s, but as Hawk and Animal wore on, their appeal lessened over time as their abilities diminished, and in the case of Hawk, personal problems got out of control. When Hawk tragically passed away in 2003, that was thought to be the end of the line for the LOD, but WWE had other plans, resuscitating the act in 2005. Replacing Hawk was Heidenreich, another large smash-mouth type, and I suppose as good a choice as any for the role. This was done largely to coincide with the release of a DVD retrospective on the Road Warriors, and the team actually won the tag team titles, beating Eminem at the Great American Bash. They had the paint and the shoulder pads and the music and the Doomsday device, but it just wasn't the same. Heidenreich simply wasn't Hawk. Animal was noticeably older and not the dynamic performer of prior years, and the whole thing came across as a nostalgia-driven cash-in at the expense of other, better teams. Ooh, what a dud! Number 4, the King of the Ring. The King of the Ring tournament was an excellent concept that was an almost guaranteed platform for superstardom. I mean, just look at the fruit here, folks. Bret Hart, Owen Hart, Steve Austin, Triple H, Kurt Angle, Brock Lesnar, King Booker, Edge, Mabel. Well, they can't all be winners, can they? Anyway, the King of the Ring was a big deal, formerly with its own pay-per-view, and the winner usually being someone the company had grand plans for. William Regal was probably the last great king in 2008, and WWE had the right idea with Sheamus and Wade Barrett in 2010 and 2015, but whenever they've decided to revamp the concept, it has underwhelmed, and the eventual result has typically been anticlimactic. Having all of the matches take place on Raw or SmackDown really lessens the tournament and makes it feel a lot less special. So too does crowning an absolute chancer like Baron Corbin as king, now you mention it. No longer is it a case of a talented wrestler gutting it out over several matches over the course of one night after wrestling other tournament matches on television in earlier weeks. The more recent versions of the tournament have been little more than excuses to fill TV time and give a stagnant character a bit of a royal makeover. Number 3, the NWO. Whenever business is on the downswing, Vince McMahon and WWE have a tendency to go back to something with a proven track record. Though not his own creation, that was the thinking in bringing back the New World Order in early 2002. Fresh off the colossal disappointment that was the invasion, WWE was in decline and Vince felt as though that he needed an influx of bankable stars from the past. So Hogan, Hall and Nash came back into the fold, with Vince in the storyline introducing them as a lethal dose of poison to take down his own company from within, as part of his dispute with on-screen co-owner Ric Flair. It didn't make a lick of sense, and from the off, the NWO looked like a neutered version of their formerly rebellious selves. They kicked off the No Way Out pay-per-view with an inside reference-filled promo, but by the end of the night, they had been emasculated by The Rock. The one highlight of the Order's WWE run was the WrestleMania match between the Hulkster and the People's Champion, after which Hogan turned face and the NWO became more diluted as the likes of Big Show, X-Pac and Booker T joined its ranks. All told, WWE's version of the New World Order came and went within the space of a few months, and nothing about their presence was too sweet. Number 2, DX. In many ways, D-Generation X was WWE's answer to WCW's New World Order. The group comprising Shawn Michaels, Triple H and Chyna was one of the hottest acts on television in 1997 and 98, their momentum continuing even when its original leader was sidelined and the game took charge. That version of DX, with X-Pac and the New Age Outlaws added to the party, was also a winner, but eventually Triple H outgrew them and the faction faded away. WWE teased a reunion between the Cerebral Assassin and the Heartbreak Kid in 2002, but actually followed through with it 4 years later, and thus began a long 6 months of willy and fart jokes. While DX's feuds with the McMahons and Rated RKO certainly did have their moments, the reboot felt regressive. And not to mention, there was something a little sad about a couple of tanned dads, one of which was a noted born-again Christian trying to be edgy and hip. Hunter's torn quad meant that the reunion had a premature ending, but WWE went back to the well in 2009. And this time, you filthy marks, they were rated PG. Suck it! Can we even say that anymore? Number 1, ECW. Inspired by the large sums of cash the rise and fall of ECW DVD and One Night Stand pay-per-view generated, Vince McMahon decided to bring ECW back full-time in the summer of 2006. As part of his plans, he signed ECW icons like the Sandman and Sabu to contracts, gave Paul Heyman a large say in creative, and looked to build the brand around Rob Van Dam. It promised so much, but very quickly delivered so little. Apparent from the start that this was really just another WWE product and a vehicle for stars like Kurt Angle, Big Show, and whoever else happened to guest star that week, WWECW was also home to disasters like the Zombie and Batista working at the Hammerstein Ballroom. There were positives, such as the rise of CM Punk, but before long the original ECW element was phased out in favor of WWE muscle boys like Bobby Lashley and Test. The nadir was probably the December to Dismember pay-per-view, a huge critical and commercial flop that just about killed off any remaining enthusiasm in the brand and also led to the exit of Paul Heyman. From there, ECW limped along to its sad, inevitable death, and by the end of its run, resembled little more than a finishing school for developmental prospects who probably couldn't wait to end up on Raw or SmackDown.